get started.
Oh, okay.
I'd like to call to order the October 25th ACSD board meeting. With that, we will start off with introductions. We'll start with Peter B.
Good. Peter Rose, Superintendent. Good evening.
Malcolm,
Lindsay Hescott,
Peter Conlon, Mary Gill,
Victoria Jetty.
Darcy Gonzalez, Barbara Wilson,
Jen Newseder. Mary Colonnane.
Mary Heather Noble, Betty Buckley,
Will Hatch, Technology Director.
Board members on the call, Lorraine.
Lorraine Morse.
Amy McGlashan.
Suzanne Buck.
Great. Staff members in the room, if you could introduce yourselves, please.
Caitlin Steele, Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, Nicole Carter, Director of Equity and Student Services, Jen Travis, Principal at Mary Hogan.
Mike Dudek, Principal of Mums.
Great. Well, could you read off the attendees?
Sure. We have Alice Schermerhorn, Amy Mason, Brian Mason, Sandra Santo, Emily Blistine, Joanna Doria, Lauren Daly, Logan Price, Nancy Crawford, Paul Sherrier, Ruth Bernstein, and Virginia Cannell.
Thank you very much. At this time, as always, we would like to provide folks with the opportunity for public comment. We'll start off first with anyone in the room who has a public comment. Please raise your hand. Great. Any folks on Zoom who have a public comment, please raise your hand. Then we'll pull you over into the panelist section for that time period of your comment.
Okay, we have Virginia Cannell.
Great.
Okay. I guess I gotta move her over because she's
Yeah.
moving over. I have to unmute. There we go.
There you go. I'm off mute.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm sorry. This is all new to me. Is this my time to speak? Okay. I'm coming to the board and I'm trying to get myself involved in this type of stuff. Coming from a parent that is dealing with a lot of the stuff that's been going on with our school systems. I have 3 kids in the district, and my 2 daughters, my youngest, and they have been having a real hard time. I have been incredibly involved in all of the stuff that they're going through. I have been, I have them actively working with literally every agency possible. There is like no more agencies to help support them and address the needs that they have. The reason for me coming here is the short of it. My student had gotten into a fist fight at the middle school. And this is after the months and months, Mr. Conforti, Mr. Dudek, they're like, they know me very well. I'm there a lot. And I feel like I'm being told that the schools are short staffed. I can totally understand that. My student seems to not have the right supports at the school. And I feel like the disciplinary actions that we are taking, it's sort of like, yes, absolutely. My student needs to be held accountable for the things that she is doing, which we have been doing. I feel like I'm knocking my head against a wall sometimes with the inconsistency of what she needs, and going to the school, meeting upon meeting, not even requested, just showing up when there's an issue and saying, what can I do? What can I do to help? Clearly, this is causing disruption for the school, the staff, our resources, our community, myself, my work, all of it. And a couple of, I would say maybe a month ago, 6 weeks ago, Mr. Conforti and I had this conversation, and I was just super frustrated. And at the time it was, okay, we're going to, talk about putting in place like a crisis, like emergency kind of thing with changes, because obviously what we're doing is not working. I feel like with my student, it is we go through these disciplinary things, and then I kind of, okay, this is what we do, and then we throw her right back into the fire with the same problems, the same issues with students, the same stuff. So she's 12 when she's 12, and she doesn't know what she doesn't know. She's a child. So I'm trying to guide her and everything, do everything I can to help her in this situation. But when I drop my student off at the school and send her through those doors, it's out of my hands. Like there's literally nothing, more to do. With this last bout, I suggested, okay, if there is not staff to make sure that, to support her appropriately, the amount of time that I'm spending every day talking to Mr. Conforti, Mr. Dudek, Lorraine, the school-based CSAC clinician at Mums. Caitlin also has an outreach CSAC worker that comes to the house. Caitlin's involved in a girls group every other Thursday. If nothing that we have is working, like, I will take the time out to go with my student and make sure that she is following the rules and all of these things. I feel like, and that I was told that's not an option. I'm really frustrated because I've got sort of two levels of different stuff that I'm dealing with. My mom's student, like I said, she's in a lot more turmoil right now. My older daughter is a freshman at the high school, and she had experienced a little bit of a rough go. However, so as of last week, I pulled both of the girls out of school. It was kind of like, at this point, crisis mode for me. We need to stop doing what we're doing. I need to stop just sending them in there and setting them up for failure, and take a breath, regroup, look at my options. With my older student, my 9th grader, she had sort of been dabbling into getting into some trouble, and every day coming home, she was expressing to me, hey, listen, this is what I'm going through, this is how I feel. Here a couple of examples. As far as the social piece, she was talking about, like, there are some students there that there was potential a potential fight. When she's getting all this stuff said to her in the hallway, she felt like she had to speak up and for lack of a better word, run her mouth back, because she said, I don't want students to look at me like, oh, you're weak, but she said, I'm terrified. These girls are bigger than me. I know they can beat me up. That type of stuff. She's saying, I'm scared to go to the bathroom by myself because I don't want to get jumped. As far as the academic aspect at the high school, Natalie was expressing the need for help with her math classes. I set up a meeting on my own to go in to speak with Kathy Demon and say, hey, this is the stuff that my kid is coming home and talking to me about. This is the stuff that I want to try to help her and figure it out so that high school isn't miserable for her. Not, 9th grade, it's hard to figure out where you're fitting in and all of that. So like I said, academically, she was struggling in a math class, was asking for help. She said when she asks for help in school, she says, they make me feel like I'm dumb. Like, why aren't you getting this? She had told me that there is a math class that offered help to students that were struggling with math. And I said this to Miss Demon, and she said, okay, yes, absolutely. Like, we'll look into this and trying to get her the help she needs academically. So, okay, this was, like I said, maybe a month ago. Back at that point, she didn't even know who her guidance counselor was at the high school. She had never spoke to him. He had never reached out, none of it. So after my going into the school, before she even had any trouble like that, still to this day, I pulled her out last week, but still to this day, there's been no changes in any of her academic schedule. There's been no contact from a guidance counselor whatsoever. So when I decided to take her out of the school, Ms. Demon had said to me, like, oh, but Natalie's been doing fine. Like, she hasn't made any waves. I had a meeting this morning with the school resource officer, Connor Souza, I believe that's how I pronounce his name. And he had said the same thing. Like, there was one minor argument incident, but he said, other than that, I haven't heard anything about her. And I said, absolutely, because she's white knuckling it. She's doing what she needs to do to get through school because she knows what's expected of her. And she doesn't want to be in trouble. She doesn't want to be the bad kid. She doesn't want all these things. But her experience going to that school every day is miserable. So when I reach out for help for her, I'm not getting it. And now I've resorted to, as of the 1st of November, I'm enrolling her into Virgins High School, which is costing me $3,000 a month to tuition her. I'm hoping to get her in for school choice for the following school year. But just in this week that I've worked with Virgins to try to get her enrolled, I've spoke with Ann Vincent, I believe her name is, in the guidance office. I spoke with Lori, their superintendent. Their guidance counselor has reached out to us to talk to Natalie. Hey, what are you interested in? What can we do to help? We want to support you. We want you to succeed. Virgins has my significant other. He is a basketball coach at Virgins. He has coached the middle school basketball this is his 5th season now, going into the 5th season. There's a lot of accountability, I feel, in that school district. I've voiced this too to other folks, so if I'm redundant, I'm sorry. Something as simple as gym class. The students are required to change into gym clothes for gym class. If you don't do that, you don't pass gym class. So there's like this whole different vibe. So I feel that they, and I know other students that are there and parents. And just last week I had a conversation with another parent and we had said, Natalie was there and, we're, switching schools. And they said, okay, they're going to hold you accountable. And so that type of vibe on top of what we've experienced just in a week with the school officials reaching out, the school counselor reaching out and basically saying to Natalie, we want you to succeed. We're glad you're here. What can we do to help you? And rallying around her. I feel at Middlebury, her experience is that basically, as long as I have a son that's a sophomore at the school, he's a great kid, not really in trouble. He's a fantastic athlete, all of it. He doesn't have any issues. I feel that in Middlebury, what I've seen is as long as you're a student that's not creating waves, you're good to go. The students that need a little bit of extra oomph and a little extra stuff, it's sort of my student is made to feel like they're an inconvenience. And do I want to have to put her in a different school? Do I want to have to worry about transportation and with multiple schools, multiple kids? Do I want to pay over a mortgage payment to send my child to school? Absolutely not to all of that. If this is what is going to give her a successful experience in high school and set her up to succeed, this is what we have to do. So I feel like as far as my 9th grader, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And I guess the proof will be in the pudding once she starts on Monday, and let's see where she takes it. As far as the middle school stuff, my frustration is this. I obviously cannot afford to send 2 students to different school. That's not even an option. My student doesn't want to have to change schools. My student is it's frustrating because when we pull her out of the environment, for example, today we sat at the Middlebury police station and had an hour-plus long conversation with the resource officer. And it was a very productive, respectful meeting all the way around. And when we got into the car, she said, "Oh, Mom, that wasn't that bad." And I said, "Listen, absolutely. When you give respect, you get respect. If you're swearing at Officer Souza and calling him names and all of this, he's not going to be willing to listen to you and hear you and advocate for you and all these things because you get what you give." So sometimes I feel like the environment, when I take my student like outside of school, it's not even anywhere like this. So once I send her through those doors, it's like I have a whole different kid. I feel like a lot of the issues that my child gets wrapped up in are other students' issues. They are like, oh, Caitlin will do something about it, so let's go get Caitlin. And then she's again in a position where, oh, well, I've gotta like come through for my friends, so I'm gonna do this. And in the end, like I've explained to her and she's experienced, your friends are still in school. Your friends are still going to do what they got to do. You're now suspended for 5 days, and we're at the police station because you got into a fist fight over something that had nothing to do with you. So it's really discouraging for me because I know what my child is capable of because I see it. And again, when we're sitting there just having these conversations with the officer, like she isn't this monster that everyone portrays her to be. I feel like the consistency of the discipline at moms needs to change, like now, like 2 months ago. Mr. Dudek and I had this conversation a long time ago, and I'm being very redundant, but something as small as the cell phones at the school. I feel like the kids run the school. I feel like they all have no respect for the teachers, the staff, any of it. I feel so much feel for the staff because I get it. I hands down to them for suiting up and showing up every day. I couldn't do what they do. I feel like we need to enforce the authority again. I think that there's too much putting out fires and inconsistency that the kids think it's a joke. For example, so this morning, sitting with the officer, I printed out the handbook for the middle school, and with it, I have all of the discipline reports that my child has received since the beginning of the year. And I received this packet what was mailed to me on October 14th. This is the first that I've seen these discipline reports, and they date back till August. One of the reports dated in August 22nd was the violation. It wasn't signed until September 22nd. And when I'm going through the comments and what happened and all of this, the actions it's all over the board. So like, for example, her first violation in August 22nd was Caitlin showed up to class saying she got lost with a friend. So she got a restricted schedule. Okay.
Ma'am, I'm gonna ask you just a couple more minutes, okay, just so that we can be respectful of the other folks who are may also want.
Sure. So I'll make it simple. My point is this: and back to the phones. Like I'll try to make it simple. Back to the phones. In your handbook, it says the phones are not allowed in school. Okay, phones are a lot of these problems. If we take the phones away, that's going to alleviate a lot of issues, and it's going to start to take back authority. In the book, it says if you get caught with your phone in class, the phone is taken and it is put in the office, and you get your phone at the end of the day. First violation. Second violation. You get caught with your phone. Your phone gets taken and put in the office, and your parent or guardian needs to come pick the phone up. My experience for the last several months, my child gets caught with a phone. The teachers fight with them to take it. When they take it, then they return it at the end of class at 45 minutes later. What is that teaching her? Again, in here, detentions. My child has never received a detention ever. And in this book, it says first offense this, second offense this. While I know it's guidance, and I know that dependent on the student and the history, I get that. But ever since she was a fresh student at that school, the disciplinary stuff has been up and down, up and down. My student is a student that needs to know if you do this, this will happen. And we need to stick to it, just like parenting. I have learned this in my parenting. Very important. So what I'm asking at the school is for us to be consistent, for us to be I don't care I shouldn't say I don't care. If we have 40 kids in a detention, we need to start showing them that it's not a free for all, that the million kids in the bathroom all the time, all of it, you don't go to the bathroom 8 times in one class. That's not acceptable. And I think I just wish that we could hold them accountable so that just like at home with her, she knows what to expect. She knows where she pushes boundaries and where, and absolutely no go. I feel at school, she feels it's a free for all, and she's getting herself into a madness of trouble that she doesn't understand the seriousness. Today, I think she did, sitting in a police department. But I'm begging for help from the school to help me. When you're telling me I cannot go in and be the one-on-one for my child to get her on track and hold her accountable, I need somebody to do that because I have no other options. I have to send her to this school, and I'm terrified that if I send her back, she's then going to end up getting expelled or something. And she's 12. She doesn't understand the severity of how this will follow her and affect her in life. So I just wanted to express that because I'm having a heck of a time trying to get this stuff in order. And I don't see this type of stuff consistently at home at all. It seems every day she has got a problem at school.
Thank you very much for your comments.
I don't think that's the right one.
I don't see where,
But it's over,
No, I,
oh, I got it, okay.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
There you go. Any other public comments from folks on Zoom? Great. Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is the minutes. Could I have a motion?
Make a motion.
Motion to approve, second.
Second.
Second by Mary. Any comments on the minutes? Chip?
I always seem to have comments on minutes, I say that every time, but so be it. In our rather, I thought good, but obviously difficult discussion on the flag issue, I thought it would be appropriate that some of the pertinent comments would be attached to certain board members, okay? This was too big an issue for this board not to have positions sort of placed, because it ended up 13-0, we passed that. It was nothing like that as we went through it all. I don't need to be quoted, I don't need to be all of that, but I just thought that when it says it passed 10 by 10, or it passed 10, that sort of did not speak to the difficulties that we had in coming to resolution on this, for whatever it is. And so I just think for whoever the minute taker is, and I'm not criticizing Suzanne on this because it is a hard job to deal with this. However, I just think it's important that we as board members, we're public officials basically, and we should, and in conditions like this, we should be held accountable for positions that we take that caused us a year and a half to get to this conclusion, okay? So that's where I'm coming from.
Victoria?
So Chip,
Oh, go
this
ahead.
is Suzanne. So when that vote was taken, the ayes were asked for, and there was never any nay votes requested. So the comment was there were 10 ayes, the vote has passed. So I don't know who, I know where I voted, but being online, I can't see where other people voted or if they had a chance to say no. So that's why it was reported that way. I apologize.
Yeah, I don't mean to make waves. I just thought that we had spent a long time in this, and some of us had fairly specific positions over the time that were really difficult to come by, honestly. And then to have it sort of, well, past 10 and never anything. I appreciate you updating on that difficulty, but for future reference, I really believe it should be that way. So if it's to take a position against it, it's not because we want our name in the paper or, but it should be there. That's our position and we should be able to either stand on it or not. And most things it's not necessary, but that one I thought was, thank you, it's enough.
Vic?
No, I second Chip's comment in that I thought the minutes read as a narrative. Usually, Suzanne, you sort of highlight whose thought it was, or you use direct quotes, and you have a sense of sort of who's speaking in the conversation. And I didn't know if in this case, because it was a sensitive topic or something, if you had decided not to, but it felt to me that the whole thing read as a narrative, and it was a little bit, if I hadn't been in the meeting and recalled who said what, I might have been confused as to exactly sort of how the discussion unfolded.
Any other comments on the minute? Or Heather?
I just have two very specific ones. One is in item C, the approval of the minutes part. The status does not say passed, and so it just needs to say passed with corrections. And then also in item E, the end of the final paragraph, homeschool collection should instead read homeschool connection.
Any other comments on the minute? Great, so we'll approve the minutes, the motion is to approve the minutes with those corrections. And I think we're gonna need to figure out a way to kind of summarize, I don't know if going back, Suzanne, you feel as if it's possible to summarize certain elements of the discussion and attribute them to board members, or what are your suggestions for how to move forward on it?
So let me paraphrase it this way. Legally, the only requirement as far as minutes is to write down that there was a conversation, to take down the motion, and to let it go with that. I always walk a balance trying to figure out which way the board wants me to report the minutes. Sometimes they want names associated with the minutes and sometimes they don't. I'm willing to go back and parcel out and put people's names against what I can remember and what I can find online, but I can't change the way the motion was called, and the motion was called just for ayes. And then it was said the motion passed with 10 voting. So I wasn't in the room. I don't know who the 3 were that didn't vote, if there were even 3 missing that night. So that part I can't change, and I'm sorry about that. I would if I could, but I
In
can't.
the room. Right, we know from your minutes, Suzanne, who was in the room, correct?
Everyone was.
Everyone was there.
there.
It was perfect attendance that night, and everyone voted.
And I know who the 3 were who
Yeah.
voted
Can
against.
we update you? It's not illegal to update that record if we tell you who it was, right?
Legally, the motion should have asked for all those in favor, all those against, and any abstaining. But if you would like to tell me the 3 names, I know that I am one of the 3. I can go back and change that.
Would anyone else like to say who they were? Who
Yeah,
voted?
I was.
And Lorraine.
All right.
And for future reference, when I screw up, please do not in any way hesitate to say, Mary, we could do this a better way. Anyone that is always encouraged, because I guarantee you it will happen again. So thank you all in advance for your support on that. Yes, Peter.
Just on this topic, we typically almost pass everything on a voice vote without actually writing down the numbers. I guess I would just remind people that if you want to be on the record as voting some way, say, I'd like to be on the record as voting in favor of this.
Oh. Great. Okay, perfect. So all those in favor with the corrections as noted, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Next on the agenda, approve the ACSD bills.
There's a number of bills all read on, I don't know what day it was, a week ago Monday, by myself and Victoria, I believe, yeah. First one is the general fund bill of $627,390.83. A big one, but it includes two major things which I would just report out. $104,230 of that are 1/3 of all the pre-K's expenses. So all these different places, Mary John, I don't know, maybe 20 of them makes up that amount. And the second one is a bond payment to the US Bank of $157,000. So that made up more than half of that total number. So that was $627,390.83. Then there are four payrolls. First one of $114,980.83. Second one is $296,652.19. Third one is $3,789.73. Some of these are benefits and other things. And the fourth one is $922,918.40. So I would make a motion to pay these bills.
A second. Victoria, any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great, so moved. Next up, Peter.
Thank you. So the main topic tonight is an update on moms and the work that's happening at moms. We've been talking a lot about supporting moms, the students and staff there, and I've shared some of the updates with all of you recently in regards to some new staffing. We've been talking about open positions for quite a while. We've been able to fill some of those, have made some other changes as well. We continue to meet with staff at moms to problem solve. I really appreciate all of you that have reached out. I know I've seen some of you at moms, we're talking board members now, who are pitching in. I just think that says a lot. That means a lot. And I know that our entire community is wrapping their arms around not just moms, but around the entire district right now as we kind of work through a lot of the challenges of the pandemic and staffing and fatigue and all those other things. So I don't want to steal Mike's thunder. Mike Dudek, principal, is here to share some of what's happening and some highlights, some challenges, and kind of the work that's underway. So Mike, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Sure. Thank you for having me today.
Do you want to come up here?
Okay.
Might be easier. If you like to stand, you can stand. If you want to sit, you can sit.
If you don't mind, I'll sit.
Got it. Okay, like that.
Perfect. Thank you. My previous district, we had a table right in the middle. It was really nice.
Yeah.
Front and center, but I'll take the corner. So it looks like we have a little PowerPoint that Will has here. I do
You guys
echo.
are queued up.
Okay.
When you want it.
All right. So I do want to echo the sentiments from Dr. Burrows about having the support from our community and school board members. It was great to see a lot of you at our lunch and recess duty. Feel free to come in the morning or in the afternoon. It's a nice break. I've been at most lunch duties, building relationships with students, and it was a nice surprise to be able to have parents and board members there. Definitely appreciate that and welcome more volunteers. So in terms of moms, so I'd like to just be able to do hopefully a quick, concise presentation to you, and feel free to ask any questions that you have. But as you know, the year's been exceptional in terms of with transitions and many elements, including pandemic that's continuing. No student at MUMS has experienced MUMS, so our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders are new to what MUMS was. Our parents don't know MUMS. Having the addition of our 6th graders has been a unique opportunity for us. Having myself as a new principal and several others has been, quite honestly, just unique, and it's been a challenge. Typically, what I've heard and read is that it takes about 6 weeks to establish a culture. In the beginning of the year, it's taking MUMS a little longer than that. We're aware of the challenges, and we also see some amazing things happening and emerging from each of our classes. Primarily the resiliency of our staff and our students to come to school each and every day and finding a positive. So I'd like to be able to celebrate some of that with you. Teachers and admin are working incredibly hard so that students feel and are happy, healthy, thriving. That is our goal. Again, today, the overview is just to give you a brief update about MUMS. I started with this. This was something that was shared at a faculty meeting in terms of our core themes that the leadership team came together in terms of access, success, and belonging. I feel like it's most relevant for this year, especially. The phrase of let's make connections, let's build community, and let's be the joy for ourselves, our families, and our students has been resonating, and it's something that I'm going to continue to stress and move forward during these times. I just wanted to share a few quotes with you just quickly. I'm not going to read everything in its entirety, but these are 2 quotes that I've had. It was from a recent article that I was reading. A lot of my time is just thinking about and reflecting on what can we do differently with our kids and our staff. Again, it's been a unique challenge. It's not anything that we've really handled before, and we're going to continue to improve. But when we think about post-pandemic in schools, I think there's 2 schools of thought or perspectives. One is how do we get back to normal? Because that's what we know, that's what we're familiar with, that's what was, quote, good. And then the other piece is thinking about how do we think about learning loss? How do we have different programs and summer schools and extended days and so on? How do we build that academic gain or academic loss and losses in our schools? And I feel, you can go to the next slide. I think the issue with that is that a lot of communities or districts aren't really thinking about how do we build relationships back with our students, our staff. We haven't had a normal year in quite some time. I believe Shauna Lee, who's our SEL coordinator, informed me that the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, the last time that our 8th graders had something that was normal was in 5th grade. That's a long time ago. That was elementary school for them. They're coming into a building that's brand new structures, new systems, new staff, new transitions, new teams, and there's a lot going on there. So when we think about what I feel is most important, if you look a little down below, the community-focused learning environment, I think is what should be relevant and priority for us. I do, again, want and feel like there is that need of getting back to normal. There is that need to go and close the achievement gaps, but there's also a need to just build relationships with our kids and the community. And that's been, quite honestly, a challenge. We have the volumes of behavior, unregulated students has been more than I imagined. Some of the behaviors have been escalated to a level where we're thinking about how do we truly support students in the community and the school that we have and we established. So that is always going to be something that's been a focus, that we're collaborating getting the teams together, and our students and our staff, I think is really important. I think finally, as a building principal, I'm getting some leverage and time to be able to create some principal councils, particularly with our students, to know and understand what they're looking for. So I call it a lunch bunch or a learning lunch. So I'm going to be doing that every Monday and grabbing students and having pizza during lunch, just to ask them what do they feel that they need. And then just being able to get out in the community and asking for support in various ways. So I do firmly believe that in order for us to meet the needs of our students, we need to be doing this together. And I'm hoping that our staff feel that it's been collaborative for us to be able to problem solve in that sense. Next slide. So I just want to talk about some of the celebrations. You've heard a lot of what hasn't been happening, but I like to be able to share some of this because I feel it would be a disservice if I did. So students feel connected with their TA cohort, staff members. So we do have teacher advisories every day. And what I'm seeing is that a lot of our students like that small group and being able to connect with their staff members or their teachers. We're thinking about creating spaces that allow students to really think and create, learn and grow. The more I get out into classrooms, the more that I'm seeing students that are happy, that are engaged, they're doing problem-based projects, inquiry-based projects. I'm trying to capture that as much as I can through Instagram and Twitter so that people can see that. The other piece, I think, is just routines and structures are becoming familiar. It's, again, brand new to students. So some of our earliest struggling learners are learning about how am I successful in this setting? And it's taken some time, and it's going to continue to take some time, but we are seeing resilience and growth there. Quote, with privilege comes great responsibility or greater responsibility. I think that's the piece that students in middle school love, having the privilege of going to different classes and going out and outside for lunch and transitioning from teachers and having that. But there is a responsibility that that's there, that they're learning about. And to me, again, behaviors and routines and expectations is learned, and students need to continue to move forward with that from the modeling of adults. And then finally, just looking at discovering who students are and a variety of learning opportunities. Mr. Conforti mentioned to me that up in Williston this weekend, there was, I think, a state cross-country meet, and he saw a lot of our MUM students up there, and just seeing the faces and the limelight that they had, they were enjoying that moment, and we're going to continue to be able to do that with a variety of clubs, activities, learning opportunities, learning experiences, and so on. So those are a few pieces. Next slide. So action steps. So I just wanted to share a few things that I'm sure Dr. Burrows mentioned before, but we started with a task force, which are students, are just staff, variety of staff, some team leaders, some curriculum leaders, but just any staff that just wanted to get together, truly to review what were the systems and structures that were in place at some point, and improving where we go. So thinking about like the logistics behind that. What did bells and transitions look like? What did teaming look like? How do we collaborate, with one another? What did the lunch routines look like? And trying to really grasp that. That was really important for us. The SEL team, social emotional learning, is looking at just providing suggestions to our teams. I call them quarter turns, just small changes in terms of what can we do in our classrooms to build community. We have a community forum and survey that we'll be sending out to families, and I'd like to do that on a monthly basis, just to be able to get some support and feedback in terms of what's going well, where are some opportunities for growth. I did get a lot of feedback in terms of our parking and drop-off piece, and it was positive for the most part. So just elements of that, I think is just important for us to know and understand sort of what the issues or concerns are and how we can do this better. Our district teams are collaborating to think about PD and various workshops for staff in terms of de-escalation strategies, restorative practices, to having our behavioral interventionists, our SEL team, and Miss Nicole Carter. I was going to say Miss Carter, but she probably would yell at me. So Nicole Carter is helping me with that. And then our behavior, SEL, student support services are just looking at identifying spaces within our building. So whether we call it a comm space, if we're thinking about a resource room, truly identifying spaces within our building that if students are showing signs of behavior that's escalated, that we have a safe place for them to go and trying to get them out of the hallways or the classrooms or wherever they are when those behaviors happen. Next slide. So in terms of supports and positions, so I am excited that we have some positions that were posted and that we hired. So we have these positions that are going to target and show up our tier 3 practices. So when we think about our tiers 1, 2, and 3, our tier 3 would be students on 504 or IEPs. In terms of just finding additional supports there. We have SEL instruction, so we do have a Skills for Life course right now. We do have an SEL leader as part of that, so really thinking about how to target the tier 1 and tier 2 SEL supports. So we did just hire recently a general ed teacher to be able to help and bridge that. Our tier 1 and 3 response systems, so we have a resource room that I mentioned, so we're going to find 2 spaces in our building. One that's for the SEL tier 1 students that aren't receiving any services or documented services, for them having a place to go to be able to build some skills from an SEL lens. And then again, the resource room will be staffed with a special educator. That's a brand new position for us. And then a BI or behavioral interventionist that's supervised by our BCPA. And then we have 2 BIs, one that's going to be specifically in that resource room and the other one that will be supporting our students and staff throughout the building. Next slide. So additional pieces that we have. So Karen Standard, who was a secondary ed, our special ed coordinator, has moved into the role as an additional assistant principal. So she's going to be taking on a lot of the special ed coordinator services that are happening at MUMS and really working with, she has a background and a profession in tier 3 practices. So when we're thinking about emotional regulation, behavioral outbursts, she's done a really nice job with that. She started on last Monday and has really solidified our team working together. That general ed teacher that I mentioned earlier, she started today, and we're looking to get her into sort of our win blocks. So win is a what I need block or period that happens block 1, 2, and 4, and trying to find sort of personalized learning projects for our students to be able to do, along with the media literacy and the skills for life. So that'll definitely enhance what students are getting in that win block. In terms of discipline and behavioral supports, we did hear a little bit about finding that consistency and the authority behind that. I feel that's important. It's a point well taken, but I also feel like that we need to think about behaviors as a gap in skills for students and teaching skills for our kiddos. So when we're thinking about resilient-oriented practices, the restorative practices, looking at it from a lens of trauma-informed lens, and we do have students that are exhibiting behaviors that are, in my mind, because of traumatic experiences or events that have happened, and then thinking about collaborative, proactive solutions. So really getting students at the table, talking about what are the problems, what are some solutions that we can come together with, and that to me, I think is sustainable. It's long-term change, and it's not a direct punitive piece. That still happens, but we're also looking at how do students learn so that they can move forward and become better citizens. And then finally, our EST is the educational support team. Our IEP teams are identifying clear needs. So we're again looking at the supports that are in place and looking through it from a fine-tooth comb and seeing what supports were in place at some point with students, what supports we need for students, so that we're finding some targeted interventions and supports there, because we are finding that there's new behaviors that are being exhibited, and we want to be able to provide as much as we can for them through that process. Next slide. Hashtag, I just put we will and we rise. It's a Twitter hashtag. I know some people know that. But in terms of what are we doing, what are the responses that we're looking at? And I broke that up into, I think, 4 pockets or 4 buckets. So our admin responses, right now we're looking at how do we get those tiered rooms, tiered support rooms and into place in our buildings for our neediest students. Thinking about learning groups. Again, I am a firm believer that the strongest or the smartest person in the room is the room itself. So having folks at the table to think about what are the problems and what are some possible solutions is something that I think is extremely important, and we need to identify those patterns and trends so that we could figure out what our next steps are. Hiring additional staff to support our vision. We talked about a little bit about that, but we have a general educator, we have a special educator, we have 2 BIs, and then Karen Sanders moved into that assistant principal position, along with, we're still in the need for paraprofessionals, particularly for our one-to-ones. Being present to students and staff. Just speaking with a few folks about how do we, as administrators or just people in the building, how are we present? And then just, again, I think just getting into the hallways during transition time, getting into classrooms. We're asking teachers to keep their doors open, and so that we can walk in if we're seeing and identifying certain things. A couple days ago, I had my desk set up right outside the choir room, so that was my office for 2 hours while I was checking some emails and doing other things. I think just any way that I can be present and available to anyone, I think is really important, and along with the team. And then providing additional support through PD and workshops. Right now, we're asking folks, our staff, what is it that we need for PD? What are you looking for? If you had time in your day to be able to learn or be able to pick up a skill, what is that? Our November 10th, we're planning what that will look like. We had our early release day. It was all about restorative practices. So there is that buy-in with staff members there. From a support staff responses, we're looking at our SEL team to build de-escalation strategies and coping skills for students and staff members. Our behavioral team is available to do observations and draft out behavioral plans for some of our students that our teachers are struggling with. Behavioral interventionists, we have 2, and I'm eager to see how they will fit into our month schedule and our culture. They'll be going through a lot of training with Nicole. Our SPED department, special ed department, and student services. For me, I think it's all about collecting the data so that we can go and look at what supports are in place. So that if we need to amend IEPs or look at 504s or review ESTs, we know and can understand what specifically students are needing today. And I think that's definitely very important. Another slide. No, there's one more. So staff and faculty, what we ask from our staff is that we look at everything that we do through an SEL lens, so building relationships through restorative practices. I think that is a very important piece. An invitation for admin and supports to be able to come into classrooms. I think just a simple thing of having the door open allows me to just walk in and not disrupt the learning environment. And some teachers are doing that on a regular basis, others don't. And I don't think that's any indication that they're not welcoming people in, but I think it's just an easy thing. I don't want to distract the natural learning that's happening by knocking on a door and coming in. So I'm just asking for folks to leave their doors open if possible. And then The other piece is just thinking about who are the greatest needs in our building, and letting us go through that process of collecting data, identifying what targeted supports we need, and going through an EST process, an IEP, and allowing and giving permission for our staff members to show up to meetings and provide their feedback so that we have a collaborative solution to some of the issues and concerns that are being raised. And then finally, in terms of community responses, I just added this because I think it takes a community to raise or to educate teachers, to educate students. And it's been incredible to see the responses that I'm getting from parents and community members in terms of how can we help support moms. That energy is there. People want moms to succeed. And I appreciate that each and every day that I'm walking into that building. But in thinking about community partnerships, I think is something that I talked to Mary about, of how do we get people that are in the community to share interests, talents, hobbies, skills that they have, and how do we incorporate that within our flex block, which is during our lunch, 11 to 12:30, and giving some real relevant experiences for our kiddos, I think is really important. We think about flexible pathways. I think some really good research-based evidence will say that pathways that include career, interest, hands-on availability is where some students need. So having that and thinking about how do we build partnerships within community or businesses and local agencies, and also just supporting coverage needs. I mean, if people want to come out for lunch and for recess, or in the morning, bringing kids at the end of, or in the morning or at the end of the day, I'd be more than happy to have folks in there. And then thinking about just how do you volunteer or mentor a student, sharing your story, actively praising our learning community. I share stories because I think that all of us have a story, whether it's just a personal narrative or something in our past that kids just really gravitate to, and you never know what kids are going to gravitate to. But quickly, I just had I did this one experience where I had my seniors in high school go to the senior center to be with the seniors, and the energy of that was simply amazing. We had senior citizens just sharing about personal experiences, and our seniors, the high school seniors, just took it. They just held on to that story, the power of narrative, and just the power of having a connection with somebody that they don't know. Because unfortunately, a lot of our kiddos just don't have either parents or grandparents and don't have that. So anything that we can do to help support, by all means, I'm not going to be the barrier. I will allow you to come into our buildings, go outside in the courtyard, wherever you'd like to go, and be able to share that. So I think that was it. Is that well? Yeah. So that was just a brief. I was trying to be as concise as possible.
Oh, there's one more.
One more. Oh, so in terms of just gratitude, I mean, I think that just the big piece is just, for me, is just a reminder to really thank the community, our staff, for everything that they're doing. We're being resilient. We're coming into work and we're really thinking about how do we meet students where they're at. And going back to my first sort of statement in this presentation is that it's been a challenge. It's been unique, but I know that we can improve. We've seen it in the last 6-7 weeks that we've been in school. So I do want to just thank everyone here and our staff and our students for just being resilient and being committed to what we're looking to do for our students. So.
Thank you very much. It's been an amazing 3 years for everybody when you look back. And to think that we don't have another few years ahead of us that are also going to reflect change and challenge would be foolish on our part. And so first and foremost, thank you for taking this on. There's definitely no, I'm sure you didn't have a course in how to be a principal during a pandemic when you went to school to be a teacher, so.
4 years ago.
I'm sure that wasn't in the pre-service part of the program. So that is most important. To start off with some of the questions I'm sure we're gonna have, when you think about the list of challenges, opportunities, whatever words you want to use, but what you're thinking about every day and trying to solve for, and you think about the new resources and contributions that are now being brought to bear against those, how would you characterize the increase? Like, do you feel like you're bringing in 50% more new bang for the buck, 20% more new bang for the buck, 100% new bang for the buck? Like, how much more energy do you feel today compared to the beginning of school or whenever that is now standing behind you? Give us a sense of that.
It's a great question. I think just being more familiar with the building and the structures and knowing like what MUMS was, what were some of the successes and the challenges, and trying to be able to navigate that to create something that's new, I think is just for me has put me in a more, I guess, calming presence. I think, you know, my aunt's a realtor, and she said sometimes you just need to live in your house before you do anything. And for me, I take that and think, okay, let me live MUMS for a little bit. Let's see where we are. Let's see where it's going. Let's see what those needs are, and then let's act on that. And for me, I think the mantra is always just building relationships with kids and our staff members, and just asking how I can go and help. So there's a lot of listening and learning that's happening right now. I think we're in that, I wouldn't say beginning stages, but we are setting the tables for where do we want MUMS to go based off of the 6-7 weeks of data that we've had. I think clearly we saw that there were some opportunities with our schedule to be able to get some more enrichments or electives for our kiddos. So having that general ed teacher and thinking about personalized learning projects, that reflective piece is going to be definitely helpful for some of our students that were in a flex study hall. Not knowing what the behaviors were and the volume of it was eye-opening. So thinking about the spaces that we're trying to create, and you know, I know I've used probably a lot of different words for those spaces, but that's, you know, I've heard about the tiger zone or the learning zone or the restorative zone. What we're trying to do is build something with fidelity and not just throw things against the wall and see what sticks. I think that oftentimes people want to do that and say, okay, problem solved, let's move forward. For me, it's all about being reflective and really brainstorming and thinking about that. So I guess to answer your question, I feel more comfortable each and every day. And having that support, you know, having a behavioral interventionist. I mean, the other day we had fully staffed, we actually had an additional staff member because we had some students that were absent for one-to-one. And I just had this person act as the BI, being out in the hallways, facilitating where students are going, targeting where they needed to be, whether it was in guidance or seeing a clinician or seeing myself. And that just created a different environment within our hallways in the building. So yeah, I don't know what the number is. You know, I think sometimes you just kind of get that sense of like, okay, things are going really well right now, and you just feel comfortable. And every day it just feels like there's more traction and finding what our culture is. Because again, we're defining what that is with our kiddos.
And I think that's a really important point for us as a board and for us as a community, that, and I can remember when a vice principal of mine said, you have to remember, Mary, you're a practitioner when you're an educator. And the sense of that word means you're always getting better. You're always learning more. You're always improving. This is a journey. And when you come through that journey with this road that we have encountered, I worry that people think there's just going to be some, here are the 10 things you have to do list. And that's not what this is about. And so I just really wanted to get that sense from you, because as a practitioner, you're going to be going through a journey on this, not just a one-stop fits all.
No, absolutely. And you always have to think about what's that long-lasting, sustainable change or practice or plan, if that's possible.
Right.
Right. And I think the more people that you have at the table collaborating,
Right.
it's our problem and it's our solution. So there's that ownership, and we're gonna do that together. And I think that's powerful and people sense that when there's that ownership of solution making.
Other question, Peter?
Thanks. Until you had talked about it tonight, I hadn't really thought about the fact that really every student in that school is the first time they've been full-time at MUMS. And that, normally a grade comes in and adopts the culture, the pre-existing culture, and you are really starting from scratch. And on top of that, for a year and a half, 2 years, or whatever you want to call it, these kids haven't even had the activities where they've had a chance to get to know one another outside, which has always been sort of a tradition. They've been in sports or theater or whatever, but those haven't gone on. So these kids are all coming in to a new environment, not necessarily knowing one another as well as they could, and then they spend all day in masks, not being able to read one another, even know what, so my real question is do the kids have an opportunity to get to know one another, to see one another outside, maskless, on a more getting to know you basis?
Yeah, so thank you for even bringing that, because when I started, I was looking to lean on something, right? So as a high school principal, you lean on your seniors to navigate your freshmen through. And when I thought of our orientation, we did a 6th and 7th grade orientation, but we really needed to do a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade orientation. And we were relying on what students in the building that knew what MUMS was. That was the difficult part. So, but I think to your question, wearing masks is difficult. I think that personal element is always a hard one to have. But we do, for our lunch, students right now are going outside. So they have a 15-minute break that they're able to go outside and hang out. And we have, some structure in terms of where they are collaborating. We do have mask breaks. So I believe it's built into every single block where students are going out between 3 and 5 minutes, and being able just to hang out, get some air in, and just talk to one another. I see a lot of students just hanging out after school. So there is that need. Sometimes you think about, well, these kids can see each other after school, but for me, familiarizing myself that there's 7 communities, 8 communities, that some kids aren't seeing one another, on the weekends. So their only time is in school. But we are finding those ways of, during recess, during mask breaks, during early release that we had the other day, students were outside, and we're trying to be able to provide that as much as possible before it starts snowing and cold weather's here. But apparently people go outside in the snow. I don't know if I will, but it's there, so.
Great challenge.
Other question?
Yes.
First, thank you. This is just such a challenge. I understand, because I can't even imagine. Just a couple questions. You mentioned paras. How many paras are we in need of at MUMS? How many do we have, and how many do we need?
So we currently have 5 paraprofessionals. I believe in our budget, we slotted for 3 additional.
Okay.
So 8 total, so we have 3 available spots.
Okay, and are the paras at this point able, I know there's all this other turmoil. Are the parents able to do the one-on-one with the kids that need it? Or do they need to really be pulled away to support other activities?
So our hours are primarily one-to-one
Okay,
support.
great.
And that's been an additional support. I believe we started off with 3 at the beginning of the year, 3 one-to-ones, and that's been pushed to 5.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And just for my benefit, I'm actually going to become a substitute teacher, so, and one of the things.
And moms is your number one spot, right?
Wherever I need it.
We've got her signed up already.
I know, I'm working on it. I have an appointment on Wednesday. But what happens, you talk about these spaces and different levels of spaces, because to be honest, one of the scariest things I have is I've really been out of this environment, for 40 years. And how do you deal with the social, emotional activities and things that are happening? And so I'm just curious a little more about these spaces and what happens in these spaces.
So again, these are new spaces for us, but so we had, so the vision that I look at it, and again, I want to be able to form that team to be able to solidify that, but we would have a tier 1 comm space for any students that aren't on a 504 or an IEP. So no one that's on the service, but that does need coping skills, coping strategies to regulate behaviors and build that skill set. So right now we do have a teacher who's teaching skills for life. He's a social emotional learning leader in our building. So he would be slated to be able to identify those students and really build that curriculum with that, but also being able to support them when they're having a difficult day. I think having one of our BIs, or behavioral interventionists, that is, I wouldn't say, I'm going to say it's floating, but it's just looking for those areas of need of where to support. So I can see that this person going into that space. The other space that we would have would be probably, I think, aligned with high school in their version of a resource room, trying to stick to that same language, but that resource room would be for a tier 3 any students on that has a service or pencil for a service, where we would have a BI there and a special educator. And that person or that group program would take on the academic and behavioral needs of that student. So
can I ask a question?
Yep.
So if in a classroom situation,
Yes.
you observe a situation happening,
Yep.
then the teacher or someone that's passing by, that student is removed from that setting if need be?
If need be. I mean, so right now, if you're the teacher of record and you're in the classroom and you have a concern with a student that's there, we have radios, or every teacher's equipped with a phone that goes directly down to the office, and they radio or call, and typically myself or either the 2 admin APs are going in, and usually the students are coming out. They'll be asked to leave if they can, head out to the main office. We usually find them out in the hallways and try to connect with them prior. But I do see that team of our behavioral interventionists being a part of that. So sometimes it could be something that might be somewhat minor. We can have a 5-minute conversation and try to push them back into a class if we feel like they're ready for learning. But that's the question. Like I always ask, are you ready to learn right now? Are you ready to go back into that classroom? And people are generally honest because they do want to go back. I mean, because right now sitting in the main office for the next 20, 30, 40 minutes is just, it's not entertaining. And they want to be with their social network of folks. But we do have that opportunity to be able to go in, support. And right now our priority is to be out in the hallways in that space. So typically if anything is occurring, it's happening in the last 5 minutes of a class. Having admin out there and having 3 now with the addition of PIs is just incredible support for us to be able to, to be able to regulate that.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike.
I spent some time there last week and, hope to get back again. I found your teachers and your staff to be incredibly patient and skilled as soon as something cropped up. I had to admire how calm they were and how dedicated they are. As a person coming in, I mean, I've worked in schools for a long time, and I know it takes the kids time to trust these people coming in. They've never seen us before, right? And so all of a sudden the stranger comes in and we're supposed to be helping, and we don't always know the protocols or the strategies that they're using. So I just wonder, when you're doing your professional development, if we could be invited to participate in that, just to learn and to see some of the ideas that are coming out, so that we're not coming in cold. And I think the more we're in there, the kids will start to know who we are, and they'll feel more comfortable with us and recognize she's just, she's somebody who works here. So I have to say your staff is wonderful, and they're doing the best they can, but we can be more helpful the more we know if we're helping. We're the subs.
No, I thank you, Mary. I mean, I think to your point, I think students don't trust. It's not, it's difficult. It's, even when I came on board, just asking students their names.
Yeah.
Some of the comments were, well, why are you asking me my name?
It's just authoritarian.
Yeah.
But, and it's, I mean, we laugh at it, but then there's a history of like, why? Like, I'm trying to build a relationship with you.
Yeah.
What's your name? So I don't call you hey guy or hey student or something. Like, and it was just eye-opening that. But to your point, if they don't, if students or adults don't trust you, they're not gonna give you anything in return.
No.
For something that you don't want in return. Yes.
Mary, Heather, then Jen.
I have two questions for you, Mike. And first of all, thank you for a really thorough, I think, honest presentation. One is, I guess I'm sort of curious, and I'm trying to get a sense of, some of the things that we've been hearing about moms, and some of the feedback we've gotten from some subs who have come and commented during public comment. I'm wondering if some of the challenges are, a result of kiddos, or whether you feel or teachers feel, kiddos who are already in need of or already have some interventions that are just not enough. So, kiddos that are kind of already on the radar, but where we're seeing flare-ups and we need more support for that student body, or whether this pandemic and the challenges that are being presented are causing us to identify new students who, who might be considered for some kind of plan. So I'm just trying to get a sense of that. And then my second question, if you wouldn't mind, I would love to know what you think, either yourself or your staff, if on Friday you came into school and somebody said, oh, great news, fill in the blank has been done, and that brought you great relief, what would that fill in the blank thing be?
Okay, great. You guys are asking great questions. Get me to think a little. So I think that some of the interactions or behaviors with some students that are receiving interventions currently, I think the pandemic has sort of just increased that level of angst or need or whatever that skill is missing. I think a lot of it is just relationships and communication is just it's not fluid, if I could use that word. And I think for some, coming back into a social environment, and again, particularly when you think about our 8th graders that are, they had 5th grade experience, 6th and 7th grade has been pretty much sort of remote, hybrid, sort of, in this anxiety-ridden pandemic, and then they're coming back into this whole new social environment. So I think that increases a little bit, and I think we do have some students that we really need to think about, is this, what we're providing, is it enough? And I think this is where that our process in terms of EST and our IPs and getting the team to collaborate and think about, okay, here's an intervention that we put into place or an accommodation. Let's review it every 4 to 6 weeks. Is it improving? Is it not? And what do we need to do to move forward? I think there's other students. I think just from the volume of behavior, like the amount of it, I think every year that I've been in education, you think about the 4 to 6 students that are in your building. We have more than 4 to 6 students that are sort of at that level of heightened. So I think the pandemic has helped, has been a part of it, but I think there's other elements that go into that. I mentioned to Peter, I said, having a great day, or, there's probably more that I could probably share, and have a better answer for you. But what immediately came to mind is being able to walk into the building, and it seems like I come in earlier and leave later, is just not worrying about what the holes are with our schedule and our staff. Like, where do we have to fill in the gaps because of absences, or just, if I had a full staff and did not have to worry, and I could, get outside at 7:30 and greet kids and not looking at a schedule and saying, okay, I have 4 or 5 holes, where are we figuring this out? And we're playing this matrix. That just creates anxiety for anybody.
Yeah.
So if I had that, that's a great day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jen and then Amy.
I'll echo everybody's thank yous. It was really nice to hear the detail about the plan. And I'm one of those people that if I know more about something, I have less anxiety about it. So it was really great to understand the structures that you're putting in place and the folks. And it's really nice for the community to be able to get back involved. And as I think you've seen, our community really does value education. And so to be able to actually do something to help, hopefully you can use us more and don't be afraid to call out because people do like to help out.
Sure.
So one piece, and maybe I missed it, I did hear you talk great, like the great idea about just bringing in some students at lunchtime to talk to them about what do you need, what do you like? Mm-hmm. And then I feel like I'm seeing on your daily bulletin about our reinvigorating the student ambassador group. Mm-hmm. And student leaders and positive student role models. And I'm just wondering if that's something that's on your radar and thinking about how that might help to transform the culture as well into a more positive student environment as opposed to getting attention by doing bad things.
Sure. No, I think that's being transparent. I think as a staff, we talked about the energy and the focus on a certain behavior or a certain student and thinking about those kids that are just, they're there, they want to learn, they want to do well, they want to do what's right, and how do we bring attention to them? So I know our 8th grade team did a wonderful September sort of team challenge and brought everybody together in the cafeteria and had various awards. And I'm thinking to myself, this needs to happen 6th through 8th. If this isn't just an 8th grade team, how do we do this together so that we catch kids doing right? And I think having that student ambassadors, that's something that I'm learning who that group is and what they were doing. But I do feel that we have 2 new facilitators or mentors for that. And I know that others that were a part of that are still in the building and just trying to get them off the ground. Because again, student leadership, I think, is really important. I came into this district saying, this isn't my school or our school, this is the students that are in it school. So how do we provide them with that leadership opportunity? So I'd like to be able to work with the student ambassadors on that front as well, because I think that's important.
Amy?
Thanks. That's actually, that was a lot of what I was going to ask, but also I'm just curious what from the discussions that you have, and let me just also back up and say, as my colleagues have also said, this is an amazing amount of work that really tries to touch on, how you deal with the immediate, because there are things that are happening every day that you have to manage, and at the same time, keeping your eye on where we need to go and the culture you need to build and how to use these nuggets now to get you there. And anyway, I'm really appreciating your leadership on all of that. And I was just curious what some of the ideas and thoughts and the kinds of things that students did share with you in those, when you've convened them for the smaller group conversations. Just curious what you've heard.
I think a lot of, I mean, so we did Spirit Week this week, and part of that was just to try to find some joy and joy within the school. And I know that the last 2 dances have been canceled. We had something in September. Friday was supposed to be a dance, and we're not having that. So I figured, what could we do? So I was just asking students, and they were saying that there were elements of spirit days or spirit weeks at the elementary schools. And I said, oh, great idea. I mean, this isn't a huge time crunch. Like, we can do this. So today was twin day. Tomorrow's flannel day, and we'll end with class colors on Friday. But just that conversation of asking some of our students what kind of themes that they know or appreciate, it was so much more to them than I ever imagined. I think the other piece that students were talking about was just trying to figure out, like, there's a lot of traffic flow in the hallways, and how to get to a locker, could they carry their bags to class and so on. Those are some of the logistical pieces that they were bringing up. So today we piloted what it would look like to have a first and a second barrel for lunch. It's difficult to do a staggered barrel because our students are going with various locations, and some of them have mixed grades and mixed groups. But our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade lunches, it's one cohort. So first bell releases students from the cafeteria. Second bell releases students from the lunch from the classroom. So that mix of having 180 kids together all in one area, we diffused that a little bit. And I felt like that was something that they were looking for. I mean, that was another piece. I think the students really liked the half day and finding, like, what could they do for their flex blocks or some sort of enrichment or an elective or that outside piece. So that's a lot of my energy's been with how do we create something that's interest-based and relevant, project-based for them. That's not, what they would, I guess, typically get in a lot of the classes, but I am thrilled with the level of agency and voice that they're getting within some of their assessments in the classroom as well. So those are just some pieces, but I'm looking forward to seeing what I scheduled something for Wednesday, but I'll be at a PD day on Wednesday. But if anyone knows where I can get pizza that's really good on a discount, because I'm going to be doing it every week, let me know.
Betty,
There are
the tiger
different
card.
opinions on pizza. You're not going to get one opinion.
Get a tiger card. Get a tiger card.
Tiger card from the soccer team.
Yep.
I got a haircut this weekend, and I didn't have one.
I have 5. I
Oh,
didn't.
well, can I get one?
Go ahead with your question.
So, thank you so much, like, most of the colleagues have mentioned. My question, I have 2 questions. One is about the staff and the teachers. Dealing with all these challenges and, on top of their teaching and facing these students every day can take an emotional toll on them. Do you feel like they have the emotional support they need, like the staff and teachers? We're talking about students getting support, but what about the staff and teachers? Have you had conversations, and have they felt like they have the necessary tools to and emotional support to deal with all of this? And then the other question was about the 6th grade move. I know this is a new year for you, and you came in at a time when the 6th grade is just integrated into the middle school, but do you feel like the move has, in a way, maybe contributed to the current state of the school? Or if not, where the biggest challenge lies.
I think a lot of my quote lack of sleep comes from knowing where our staff sits. And I feel that what I've received is that the staff want to do what's right for kids. They want to continue on that level of providing feedback and building relationships and those connections. And I think it's been for them a challenge to really feel like they're doing enough. Like I had a conversation with someone today and I shared a Brene Brown quote just because I felt like I needed to share something from Monday. And it was essentially just that we're not perfect, and perfection, striving for that is always nice, but if it's going to create that anxiety or that mental health that is going to be difficult, just knowing that we're good enough at what we're doing. It's something I'm killing the quote right now, but it was great when I read it. So I think teachers are feeling just that struggle of like, how do I get to these students, and identifying kids that they have in classroom that they're trying to do what's right and what's best, feeling like they're not reaching them. I think is always something that we're looking at, Betty, because and I think just having those supports and letting them know that we have supports, we're listening, we're taking some action, we're looking to get people together to collaborate and think about what are some possible solutions, I think is really important. That again, I think the behaviors and just the lack or the numbers in the building is something that everyone is trying to get used to. A quarter of the staff are new, so they don't know what was. But I feel like that's something that we definitely need to think about. So when we think about PD and what is it that we're looking at, what do we want to focus in on, and if the issue or the concern is behaviors and how to handle behaviors, well, let's look at de-escalation. Let's look at that verbal de-escalation piece and provide a workshop there. How do we provide mindfulness for our staff? Because to your point, we talk a lot about our kids, but oftentimes we sometimes forget about our adults that are in it, and trying to give them permission to take a step back and think about like what's that level of feedback that you typically gave. Are we ever going to get to that point? Like today, we talked about parent-teacher conferences. We can't get to 120 parents because that's the caseload that our teachers have. So how do we do that differently? We just did the virtual sort of slideshow just to kind of help like share some information. I know that was a lot of work on their part, but that just gives you an example of the level of commitment that they want to do, that perfection that they want to strive for, just to be able to share something out. So that to me, I think is definitely, I'm constantly going to go back to how do we create that safe space for our staff members and think about their mental health and well-being. So I'll continue to do that. I think your piece about sixth graders, honestly, maybe I'm just being too transparent. I think our sixth graders have done best in our building. I don't like the energy, the resilience there. I don't know if it's just a lack of not knowing or just being so excited to be in the building. They're sixth grade. They're just loving life. Like they figured out lunch routines better and quicker than 7th and 8th grade. They want to listen to music at lunch. They want to go and play Foursquare. They're just loving life. I mean, I know there's some challenges and some anxiety, but for I like having sixth grade. They bring a different energy. And if I want to feel good, have a good day, I go into that sixth grade class and they do well. I mean, our 7th and 8th graders are great as well, but for some reason I was, thinking sixth grade, these are our youngest students that are going to need the most support, but they're handling their own. So that's just great to see that.
Well, Mike, we're gonna let you get home. It's after 8 o'clock, and we have the rest of the. Go ahead, Lindsay.
Can I
Sure.
say, just, I sort of waited too long to put my hand up, but I just had a couple quick questions about like access. Mary was asking about that, like as far as going in, and she mentioned professional development, but like, you know, if you could provide some information about, I mean, do we just email you or, and say, hey, I'm coming at 8, or do we need to get like a badge and a training of and review the handbook, or I'd be curious to just know like how to access and offer support. That was one thing. The other thing is, do you guys use room parents or have high school leaders come in at all at this point? Or like like in elementary school, they call them like a room parent, but do you guys have a system where you're bringing high school students in or family members in?
So we haven't had any high school students in. I mean, I'd love to be able to, because there's a significant gap between 6, even our 8th graders with our seniors or juniors to have them, and we haven't done anything to that level.
Well, they're the only ones who know what mums was,
Yeah.
really, you know, at this point. But
Well, I've had some that pick up their siblings and they talk about their positive experiences at mums, that it would be great for them to do that. I don't know what the sort of regulations there are in terms of mixing, but I think that's a great idea in terms of that mentorship piece. I think in terms of access and volunteering, Peter, I sort of rely on Gail in central office to, there is a process, there's a form in terms of volunteer.
Yeah, there's a volunteer process. I mean, in terms of engaging with a school, that generally comes from the school. So, you know, we've just opened up volunteering, and so schools are now, and sometimes this will arise out of a parent group, for example, that comes to the principal or works with the principal and says like, we would love to do these things, or I know probably Mary Hogan, that's happening, you know, that kind of thing. Some of that comes through classrooms, where a specific classroom will ask for volunteers. So it takes different forms in different schools. If you want to go to moms and spend time there, I think just working with Mike on that for now is good. And I'm sure you're working with moms groups as well to figure out like what systemically, how to best connect.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And I'm working with Emily Westein on community connections or parent connections group. So we can maybe streamline that a little bit. But I think if you have questions about coming in, email me and I will definitely find the right people to contact. Sarah in our guidance office does a really nice job of connecting as well and knowing what the needs are at the building at that point.
the last thing is I saw, Mary Heather posted a photo of the spread that was put out last week.
Yes.
To show gratitude for the teachers. Was that impactful? Is that something that could happen more often and people would really enjoy it?
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. I mean, that was, I think, a conversation with a couple adults out at pick up or drop off, and they said, what can we do? And somebody said, can we do some breakfast or lunch? And I said, absolutely. And it was great. That was another piece of me not having to take any ownership.
Yeah, Amy Mason was the one who posted and organized it on Facebook, and she set up the whole sign up and.
That was great. I saw that and thought, wow.
It was already full.
Yeah, it's like a meal train.
Anytime you could add food and people coming together is always a great thing. And there were some personalized cards that people wrote. It was awesome. It was really nice. Yeah.
Well, Mike,
Sorry.
thank you very much for your time and for the presentation and for the thoughtful responses, but most importantly, thank you for your commitment to the kids and our staff.
Sure.
So we look forward for continued growth and success at Moms.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Really good job. Peter, that was, no,
I'm sorry.
Go
You're
ahead.
gonna go on to a report of the board.
No, I was gonna say, do you have anything else under report of superintendent? And then you had your hand up, so it was like, kismet.
Just in the interest of time, I don't.
Okay, great.
Was
I
it
can
really
wrap-
good though?
I
Now I
can-
feel like we've missed out.
I can rattle on for a long time, but.
All right.
All right, so we're gonna jump now to report of the board. The first thing we're gonna chat a little bit about is, yes, Peter.
I'm wondering whether the board would entertain moving
Oh,
the
yes.
Gilda Fund request.
Yes, that's a
Jen is
great
bringing
idea.
Oh, good
Yeah.
point.
Great idea.
Another principal who needs to go
Which
home.
someone reminded me to do.
Not gonna say,
So let's, yeah, Jen, how would you like to bump yourself right on up to number one on the agenda?
Only if it works for you all.
Absolutely. Approved the Middlebury Fund request. Go right ahead, Jen.
So 2 weeks ago, I was here, so thanks for having me back. And so I was waiting for some numbers for our artist in residency proposal as well as from the PE teachers. And so you have a proposal before you to fund both some PE opportunities. And those are, the PE teachers have some ideas that are based around like various paths of COVID and what they can and may or may not be able to do. Last year, the board approved McDilton Fund that allowed us to buy some archery equipment, which has been amazing for the PE program for fifth graders. And so, they have ideas like that would allow us to be on campus, like getting a full set of snowshoes so that we can kind of do some lighter trekking. And then also, if we can hopefully go up to the snow bowl and go ski or things like that. But again, it's like COVID dependent, but I think they have ideas to go in multiple directions with that. And the amount is in line with what McDilton has typically funded for PE experiences. And then the second is for our artist in residency work with Mike Kim. And you heard about that 2 weeks ago. We've applied for 2 grants, so hopefully those will come back and help with the funding. But if they don't, you may hear more from me. But the McDilton Fund has more than enough funds in it to fund these 2 programs. Currently, I've kind of reserved and set aside money to fund to possibly attend Peak in the spring if that works COVID wise. So none of this eats into that. It's just supplemental. So I would encourage you to support both.
Peter,
I just move that we go ahead and approve the Magilton Fund request as
can we
proposed.
get a second?
Second.
Great. Any discussion? Great.
Who was
Yes,
the
Lynn-
second place?
Victoria.
Victoria.
Thank you.
Lindsay?
What's the total balance of the fund? How much interest does it, what's the average interest that it earns each year?
So these are great questions. And I believe if I pull it, so each year about 30, I think it's like it's around $33,000 is distributed out of the fund. The interest is like within the fund, and so I don't actually necessarily know. That's a great question for Logan. But the annual distribution is about 33,000. And there have been, when I was working with Brittany last year, we didn't draw down the fund at all last fiscal year because there was actually so much that had been left over and not used from past years that was like allocated but not fully funded. So I think that there is still like $8,000 in there in addition to the annual distribution of 33,000.
Any other questions? Great. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, so moved. Thank you very much, Jen.
Fun, those sound like good projects.
Right. Next up, discussion with regards to direction on the state board that update was written. Why don't you start, Peter, and then I'll do the.
Right. Okay. So there's an attachment here, which is the Ripton board's update to the state board. And I can share a little bit more about that in a moment. So since our last meeting, I met with Steve Cash, the chair of the Ripon School Board. We sat down and kind of just talked about kind of where Ripon is. Had a pretty long conversation and kind of shared some of the challenges and opportunities in terms of kind of where the state board is and its designation of, of those three options of Ripon being a supervisory district and what that meant. And we talked about kind of, he shared kind of some of the thinking that the Ripon board has had in terms of kind of looking ahead and what that could mean for Ripon. I shared with Steve what the board had discussed, which was, primarily around the charter and the two questions in the charter about board representation and the voting to close the school in terms of the board having the right to do that with the supermajority, and that the board had discussed that previously, so I shared the outcome of that discussion here. And then I received this, I think that went to the executive committee maybe. The update that they also sent to the state board. The state board did take this up at their meeting on, was it last Wednesday, October 20th? And at the meeting, they discussed the letter, which is the attachment in the meeting materials. I can read the draft minutes here. Chair Olson summarized the letter received from the Ripon School District Board. He said the conversation with the Addison Central School District had not been productive. Ripon School District Board are seeking clarification and guidance from the State Board. Chair Olson said it is the responsibility of the withdrawing entity to have a plan in place before moving forward and to understand the consequences of withdrawing. It is not the State Board's responsibility to solve the problems as they arise. Chair Olson will draft a response that offers a suggestion for mediation and will reinforce that the State Board is not going to be supportive of any plan that negatively impacts other districts with the consequences of a decision made by a withdrawing entity. So I only heard about the State Board taking this up after it had happened. So there was no communication to ACSD that, this topic is coming up, because I think they weren't going to ask us to engage with them on this topic. So that's my update.
And to add to that, we had received, I guess, characterization that the letter that was submitted to the state board was characterizing, I guess, Ripton's question as to, it doesn't seem like we're getting any place. What do you want us to do? And so that is in response to that letter being submitted to the State Board of Ed that Peter has just given. Along with that, the executive committee today, this afternoon, received, a little bit before the meeting, received an email from Steve Cash requesting a meeting with the executive committee and looking to see if there's an opportunity, while he's chatted with Peter, an opportunity to discuss with the executive committee options. And so what we wanted to chat a little bit about right now is, obviously we are happy to meet with Steve and and their board, but I want to confirm that what we have agreed to be our position, that's really our discussion points and nothing beyond that. And so we'll meet with them and be able to have that conversation face to face and hear what they have to say. But I'm assuming that our message is going to be consistent with what we as the board have approved. And I just want to make sure if anybody has any questions or comments on that, please share that now before we do that. Peter.
This is sort of stepping away from the parties involved, but just the role of the executive committee. I don't know if we have it defined in policy. I guess I would just say sure, but we haven't, I don't, this board would need to authorize the executive committee to take any sort of action or whatever, which I assume is not in the plan.
Right, I guess that's my comment in that, like, the only thing this group of people could say is what we as a board have already stated. It's also my understanding, and I agree with you, regards to the executive committee. The executive committee's purpose was established to deal with things in between full board meetings that needed to be dealt with, for lack of more technical summary of that. And so I'm assuming that this, that's why he reached out to this group, and that's why this group would be responding to him. But again, it would only, that response mirrors directly what we as a board have approved in regards to that response.
Yeah, I guess I would say that, that power of the executive committee is really for things of a timely nature that have to be dealt with between board meetings. And so I don't think we need to give you a motion to do it, but just, I think it's important that the board sort of by consensus say, sure, we're cool with you guys being the representative of the board so that this conversation can take place.
The issues in this go back to the very beginning of this. The issues of the charter change, which this board addressed. How many years ago it was now when we did not, there was a petition that came to us, mostly generated out of Ripton, to change the charter and to deal with what they thought were the not equal representations that charter led to. So it's not just this board, people. It's a number of boards leading up to this time frame that have also had that same position, as we may validate right now. But I just want to make sure that people understand that too. This isn't something, we are now deciding that's what we're going to do. This was decided a long time ago. And because it wasn't decided in Ripton's, what they thought was to their advantage, they then pursued separation. So, stating the history of it here.
Victoria?
I just for, I guess, to clarify for the board, has there been at any point, and maybe it would have been in your conversation with Steve, any indication of what they're looking for, any sort of ideas of what they would like to see would happen aside from charter changes?
Nothing specifically, like no requests or anything. We just had a conversation and kind of, talked about, what it would mean for Ripton to be a supervisory district and, conversation around Lincoln, which is also going through a similar process now. I don't think that vote's got to be any day, right? The other 4 towns, they will know.
Haven't heard that it's scheduled yet.
Oh, okay. So anyway, just kind of like a conversation around kind of the reality, so to speak, of it. But yeah, nothing. And then maybe their intention is to share that with the executive committee.
Well, I was just going to kind of ask the same question. So to be clear, we've not received, I mean, we're kind of assuming our understanding of the conditions that Ripton would require for them to remain in ACSD. And that would be either charter changes to allow for different representation or allow for town vote before the school closure, or some kind of guarantee about the elementary school. That's what I'm assuming, but if we actually, has that been stated?
No, we don't have anything, there's no formal request.
Okay. So I would presume that would be what was.
But say we haven't cooperated when there's been nothing to cooperate. There's been nothing to respond to.
Well, I guess, I mean, that's the bit of information that this board would need to have.
Right.
I think we're all making assumptions about what those conditions are, but.
Well, wait, let's get a fair character. You've met with them, and so.
Yeah, I met with them and shared, like I said, I shared
Right,
that.
so they've heard that those 2 things are not on the table, correct?
They have heard that those 2 things are not on the table. That the board was clear about those 2 things. That's what I shared.
So I guess I'm just wondering, like, what's going to be said with the executive committee?
I don't know.
That's a good question.
Okay.
Yeah. Jen?
The part that I'm sticking on is the mediator and mediation, and that they're asking basically for mediation, and then the state board said that they might suggest mediation, and if they come to meet with the executive board, I'm guessing that might be sort of the next step. And whenever these things show up, I'm always like, so who pays for it? And whose energy is being wasted? So whose time and energy is being wasted? And so have you thought about how you might handle that request if it's a mediation, that strategy that's presented?
Like Peter said, I mean, we don't have the ability to respond to any request in that meeting. So if they come to us and say, this is what we're looking for, we can get more information and ask clarifying questions and all of that. But then step number 2 is come back here. So there's nothing that we can, you know what I mean, do or say or that would be appropriate. Lindsay.
Yeah, it's also not clear to me what the, as far as being productive. And there's part in this letter, it says that we, the ACSD board, doesn't fully understand the State Board of Education's expectations. And so there are some things in the, it's not clear like what outcome is expected. And from the conversation we had about the charter change, it seems like that isn't even in our hands. Like that's not something that, you guys said it was like all the towns voted on it. So that would be, and then to make a guarantee for one of the elementary schools over the other ones, the people on the executive committee are involved in so many other things. I mean, should we just carve out a time in a regular meeting where the board comes and has a chance to speak, or, rather than having a whole, a special meeting or something? It's like, it just seems like you were saying, you're just going to reiterate what the full board voted on. Could we ask them to clarify what their objective is, or, what are the things that we don't understand about the state's expectations? I didn't realize that we didn't understand that. I thought.
Yeah, I guess I would say I'm very comfortable with it starting off small with a committee meeting before we escalate to a more formal environment.
Yeah, I also share Jen's concern about paying for it, like mediation is not.
Well, no, I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
Nobody's made a proposal to have mediation. It's just sort of floating out there.
Any other questions or comments on this? Amy?
Sorry. Yeah, I guess that's sort of what's going on in my mind, which is usually when you're talking, the board asked the negotiation. So one conversation with a stated expectation, and then no discussion about what are their common interests and where are their openings. I mean, negotiation means you find, I mean, I don't want to get into the process, but I just think it's curious that this is, that there's an expectation of a mediator and meeting with the executive committee that's going to get to anything different when we haven't seen any or heard about any other ideas. But so I guess I'm agreeing that I entrust the executive committee to engage in a discussion to see what else might come up as points of negotiation that could be brought back here for discussion. And I do see that as fairly efficient, even if it's not how we typically envision using our executive committee. But if it and we, and it's not I would say, I just want to say, explicitly, this is not a slight on the superintendent not doing what we asked him to do, and then us usurping his authority to engage in those conversations. So, and I'm assuming Peter will be there as well.
I mean,
He might be.
I'm super confident that we have and continue to be responsive as we've gone through this process to the best of our ability. And I think having this next meeting continues to reiterate and demonstrate that commitment. That other outcomes that we're all envisioning and talking about, we're not sure what's going to happen. That's just, that's just part of the story. But at the end of the day, we're going to be able to look back and say, we have done everything that we're supposed to do here in a transparent, with the best interest of these kids in mind, and that's how we move through this process. And check that box every single time. And so I think that doing this meeting, remaining consistent with the messages that we have agreed to as a board, will continue to demonstrate that. And then what happens next, and we'll figure that one out when we come to it. But right now, this is what they've asked us to do. We will do it within the constraints of us being able to do it, as Peter mentioned, and then we'll see what happens next. So that would be my 2 cents and recommendation. So is everyone comfortable with that as a next step?
Yes.
Yes.
Consensus? Yes.
Yeah,
Peter?
just a reminder, that since this is sort of out of the norm of the executive committee, just that it's got to be a warrant committee meeting with minutes taken. So if folks want to follow up and read the minutes later, or even,
Perfect.
attend, there's all that.
Great. And so Peter B, you'll help with just figuring out from a timing perspective when all that has to happen. Great. Any other updates on questions on that? All right, let's jump into committee updates. We will start with facilities.
Great. So let's see, I think in the pack, I asked Sharon to put in the facilities work plan, as well as the minutes from the meeting from October 6th, just so everybody would sort of have a little bit of an idea of what we've been working on. So I thought I'd just sort of walk you through a little bit of our initial conversation on October 6th, which is really about finishing the facilities master plan and how we're thinking about it. And then we can touch just a little bit on sustainability, which was the topic of our last meeting. So when we, on the 6th, got together, we were, I guess the discussion was around what's the facilities master plan going to look like, and I shared that sort of to ground us, I shared that when I was thinking about the facilities master plan, I sort of think of it in 4 buckets. The what we know bucket, the what we don't know bucket, the what we can do now bucket, and the how do we convey it to the public bucket. So when we're talking first about what we know a lot. We know the conditions that led to the facilities master plan, increasing costs, decreasing enrollment, the increasing need for special services, our aging and underutilized infrastructure, and the pressures on us to not raise taxes. We know about the challenges that we have as a district going forward. How do we deliver equitable programs to all students? How do we hire and retain staff? How do we best use our footprint, keep costs down, and address our transportation challenges? We know the cost associated to deferred maintenance and bringing each elementary school up to code. We know each facility and site's capacity and its strengths and weaknesses. We know what a model school would look like with 1 class per grade and full FTEs. We know about an ideal staffing model. We know a bit about the capital needs at the secondary level. We know the vision and that there are both financial and educational reasons to consolidate elementary schools. And we also know how the community feels about a lot of those things. What we don't know what the exact financial reality is. We don't know what mechanism the state will use to limit spending and pay for education.
We don't know the timeline of legislation's decisions, though we can guess 1 to 2 years. And we haven't solidified the board's definition of sustainability and how it fits into ACSD's future. We don't know what we're going to do in terms of inter-district transfer. And we have more to learn regarding bonding, its process and timeline. And I guess most of all, we don't know the results of the strategic plan for equity that will aid in guiding our decisions around the best footprint for this district. So we talked about those things in our meeting, and then we talked about the what can we do now, and that's where the facility committee work plan came into place, which, did everybody get this? Yep. Which spells out sort of the proposed schedule for getting the facilities master plan done. So I won't read the whole thing, but just we'll touch on sustainability. As a committee, we bring it back to the board to discuss. We'll talk about inter-district transfer, school choice. As a committee, bring it back to discuss as a full board. The discussion about bonding, timing and process is a little bit ongoing. We started in our first meeting, we talked a little bit about it, but we'll come back to it mid to end of November, and then update the board on it, and with a goal of having a completed draft by the beginning of December, and then the plan completed sort of mid-December before Christmas. So when we look at that, then we talked about, so how do we update the community now? And really when we thought about it, we sort of thought what we'd like to do is sort of an executive summary that basically outlines the facilities master plan and shares info into what we've learned and how we'll use it in making decisions going forward. It'll outline the work that continues, describe the work that we're waiting on and why it's held up, and sort of what we hope to learn from it. So, I mean, our priority now is to finish the facilities master plan as a document that reflects the board's beliefs and shows the work to date, and the information that will go into decision-making in the future. But I think one thing that we've talked about, and others on the committee can step in a second, is sort of shifting the perception of the facilities master plan being a prescriptive document that sort of spells out, this is what our footprint is going to look like in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, to really being more of a supportive document to the plan for equity, which is really going to be the guiding document of this district. And we see the facilities master plan really as being the supporting document that has the information in it that will be needed to make the decisions around how our footprint can best serve the results or get to the goal of the plan for equity. Does anyone else on the committee want to step in and fill in where I've left off or any comments?
I thought you did a pretty good job.
It's getting it across to the public
Yes.
is really important, because even I been involved with this all along, thought that when we came out with a facilities plan at some point, which we were planning to do over the last year or year and a half, it was going to have a footprint defined in that. And I think that's something, it's not that we've backed off on that. What we've had to do is adjust to the changing times, which you elucidated, state funding, all those kinds of things. And then it becomes a supporting document, especially in the equity component, so. But I think we need to be very clear in that.
Right, I think that, and Mary Heather's spoken about this as well, that really is our biggest challenge. That, as the public knows it, we left off, contemplating what a 3 or 4 school model would look like, which in many corners of this community was translated as what the plan was going to be. And we need to sort of help the public or educate them on the shift of, we're not going to set the footprint until we have further information.
Barb? Yeah, great. Around the strategic plan for equity, how much are we going to really describe and talk about in that? I think it's important because I don't think people understand what it is. And I have a hard time sometimes explaining, what it is. So I think that's going to be really important that we really articulate what the plan is and describe it a little bit more and what some of the goals and what we hope to maybe get as results out of that. And that would, I think, help ground why we're waiting for it. So I think focusing more on that and what we hope to see out of it may then really help describe why you're pausing. Because this is important. And I think if done well, which I'm sure it will be done, it was the piece that was missing that, I was always harping about was, where's the equity? How have we looked at this? How do we know? That kind of thing, right? And so I think that's really important to not just say those words, but to be able to articulate it in an intelligent way that people say, oh, they get it.
Yeah. Mary Heather? Well, first of all, great job summarizing.
Lay down. Oh.
I think I agree with Chip about the communication part and making sure that, we're kind of acknowledging where we left off the conversation with the public. And so that we can, clearly convey, okay, where are we going with this? And I think we really need to be clear about what the facilities master plan will and won't answer. Is it going, it may not answer, how many schools or what the specific school configuration is going to be, but it should, I hope, answer questions about what are going to be the priority investments for our district in terms of facilities. How are we going to determine those? What are the things that are going to make projects rise to the top? And obviously some of that's going to be urgency. Some of that's going to be addressing equity needs in our district, which will come out of the equity study. And then the other thing is that the facilities master plan, at least my understanding when it was being communicated to the public in the past, was always communicated as being guided by the prior strategic plan. So it kind of makes sense that, it's time for a strategic plan update. Of course, our facilities master plan will continue to be guided by our strategic plan. So that's the other piece that I think we really need to be clear about.
So do you need us to, as a board, approve something so that, or is it for the communications piece? Like, what do we need to do at this point? I know you're giving us an update, but.
I think that I'd like to see everybody come to agreement that this is the right track. We're on the right path for what we want to communicate it, that the idea of an executive summary that goes out sooner rather than later. I guess this is just to apprise the board of where the facilities committee is and make sure that the full board agrees on the direction that we're going.
Anybody want to voice any concerns with the direction as stated?
Oh, Mary, Amy.
Amy.
I keep hitting raising my hand instead of my mute. I don't have any, I appreciate this and I think it makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. And frankly, it's going to give us the language we've been trying to say all along about how this is about what's best for kids. If the timeline still looks very ambitious to me, and that's fine. I know it's just your blueprint and it's just what you're setting out to do. That's my only, to sort of settle on policy around choice and around sustainability and come up with even a blueprint by December seems very ambitious, but I'm, all for cheering you on with what we think we can do. So no concern, just I think we all will be paying close enough attention not to feel that will push back on anything that might feel rushed. That's all.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely aggressive. I think that the feeling of the facilities committee is that we're ready to sort of put a bow on it, and the work is ongoing. And so this just feels like we promised a plan. Let's get the plan done so that we can really focus on the work.
And I think an important point on something as significant as the intra-district transfer, some of these, as Victoria has shared, based upon our conversation at the committee level, was not so much that all of these questions like the inter-district transfer was going to be answered and communicated in the facilities master plan, but the question of should that be answered and communicated in the facilities master plan would be decided. And so that's a little bit nuanced, but I think provided me with a little bit more confidence that this date was then realistic.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Yep.
So any other, yes, Lindsay?
On the work plan for tonight, it says sustainable discussion.
Yes, we're
So-
about to dive into that.
Okay.
Buckle up, because I
Okay.
will wing it.
I have no comments on the work plan looks great, so I just I stepped away for like 20 seconds. I thought Barb was talking. I'm like, did I miss that? Okay.
Anything else on that? Great, so I think you're
Okay.
good to go there.
So at our last meeting, we spoke a bit about sustainability and sort of the question of in the elementary school study, if you all remember, we talked about the ACSD school experience should include welcoming and safe environment, community, equitable, academic. You remember that document?
Yes.
The last bullet of it stated that we demonstrated commitment to sustainability with good fresh air ventilation, access to natural light. And other than that, we had sort of spotty conversations about sustainability. So our discussion last week really was about how are we going to define sustainability within the facilities master plan. And I think it was Mary Heather made the point that we certainly needed to state that we're talking about sustainability from an environmental perspective, that we're not covering financial sustainability or other such. And that we want to pursue sustainable building practices and such when we're looking to upgrade and repair buildings, but that we will always strike a balance between sustainability and the cost of achieving that goal. So we haven't yet basically we are constructing a definition of sustainability that will appear in the facilities master plan. That definition has not yet been put together to share with you tonight, but I just wanted to bring it forward to see if you all had any questions around this issue or particular pieces of it that you feel would be important to have represented.
And just for the feedback, just to guide this next segment, at the end of the day, what we chatted about was the balance, and that we as part of an ID district and as part of our commitment, we are citizens of this earth, and as such, we will demonstrate our commitment to respecting and honoring that citizenship. That being said, we are also stewards of this district, and we must do so in a way that allows us to be financially sustainable moving forward. And that is the job of this board to balance the two. And so from a discussion point, is that tone, does anybody feel as if we're off on that tone before that gets written? Mary?
I think some of this will be answered in the current legislation now that's being fought in at the federal level.
Yes.
And so I agree that we can only do what we can do.
Yes.
The focus should be on.
That's a good point. Two things. One is that Act 72 or something is in the works. And they, at the state level, they are basically doing the same exercise and defining sustainability and also putting sort of measurement and rules around construction. So we will obviously, anything that we do going forward will be within the bounds of that legislation. Other point was that we are lucky to have Bruce McIntyre, who has a degree in sustainable building. That's his area of expertise. So we talked as a committee that we didn't really feel like we needed to get into sort of the nitty gritty of like what type of boiler we might try to put in, or this solar panel versus that solar panel sort of thing, but rather sort of a 30,000 foot view of what our vision would be on sustainability.
Thank you. This is a great area. I'm glad we're looking at this. A couple things. It's been something that our household, my husband has dedicated his life to for the last 9-10 years. So one thing I strongly recommend is we have to follow the current science. There's a lot that's changed over the last few years. When you look at things even like natural gas, it's not what they thought it was. Like when we built our house, for example, we put propane in, and it's not really what we would do today. So we have to look at the current science as any policy that we have or any statement on sustainability. The other thing is it's not just building, it's the products we use. There's been studies that have been done studies from universities that have come out that basically says 60% of our footprint is from the things we consume and use. And so it's important to also then look at, cleaning supplies and in everything that we use, food we use, that's all part of sustainability. So I just encourage you not that we don't just limit it to building and that we're looking at this. And really there's probably more low-hanging fruit there than there is, because you can't build a brand new building right now. And obviously, sometimes that's what you almost have to do to get it to the level you need to. And also educational opportunities for our kids, right? Having the first one really parallel with sustainability. So they're learning about it in their lives and helping as part of the school and what they use and that kind of thing. So they're contributing as well as part of the school community.
So I agree with all that. I just think we can carry this as the facilities master plan. And I think a lot of what you're talking about can be taken up in policy in other areas.
Okay.
Lindsay?
You referred to a document at the, I don't know if I've seen that, where you wrote at the bottom of it. What is?
The elementary school, this was, it was part of, David Epstein, right?
Yeah.
Presentation around the elementary school study and sort of our guiding principles. It came out of our offsite or our retreat.
So this was before we were board members.
This is probably you can find in our
But
website.
it's in the website. I'll send you.
Probably
the
2018.
Okay,
Wasn't it? Probably when you made that presentation?
Yeah.
okay, thank
Well,
you.
not the presentation, but the meeting, I think. took place.
The meeting.
Yeah.
Any other questions on this? Want to be mindful of time here,
We've
folks.
been doing this a long time.
We're all gonna have turn gray.
That's why
Where
we're-
is it right now?
Right.
Okay, great. So Victoria, do you feel as if you have what you need?
I think so.
Super.
Great.
Next update, planning and engagement committee.
Sorry for that typo.
It's okay.
It's communications.
It's communications and
Oh.
engagement committee.
I'm still seeing it as that,
I
because
know,
I'm still
well,
back then too.
All good.
The old timers get
No
it.
worries.
Okay, a few updates. I'll try to be swift with this. Our photos and content for our board bios have been given to central office, so Emily's going to be working with Keith on adding that page to our website. It should be coming soon. The committee is creating a recommendations document that I'm hoping to finalize this Friday at our next communications and engagement committee meeting. It's basically kind of a board communications plan that will include recommendations for establishing systems to address public comments and questions, to provide for routine board communications, to ACSD stakeholders, and just a little about developing a process or sort of a menu for topic-specific community engagement strategies. So it's certainly not to be, a communications plan with specific, this is how we are going to do engagement, because we feel that's very topic-specific, obviously. And so our plan is to try to wrap that up on Friday and hopefully get that on the agenda for the next board meeting to share with you. We have been awaiting instructions for how to communicate the facilities master plan update. So, basically we're kind of coordinating with Victoria's group. As soon as we get sort of an executive summary from that process, it'll kick over to our group and we'll figure out, okay, how do we get this out to the public? My personal feeling, and I guess I'd like feedback from the rest of the board on this, is that because this process has spanned 4 years and it has been emotional and contentious for some of our stakeholders, that we consider doing a multi-pronged communications effort. Something that's more than just a memo, but consider, doing some other methods to make sure that we are making our best effort to bring everyone up to speed and have folks really understand where we are in the process. I'd love some feedback on that. And then finally, the one last thing that we have talked about as a group was how to communicate the board's decision to flag the Black Lives Matter flag. We talked about it very briefly as sort of an other in our agenda at our last meeting. And I just kind of sent that conversation to Mary just to say our group felt like, we should either issue a press release or do a letter to the editor or something, since it is a board action. And so just kind of wondering what our plan is for that. So that's what I have. If you have any questions, and I'd love feedback on those two items.
I have 2 comments. And one is a question on norms. Right now, our board website includes, for some of us, our cell phone numbers. And I don't know if that's a norm, but I would like to get people's thoughts on whether or not that should be something that should be continued. I know I've gotten calls that, and I understand we have to be accessible to our community, but they have been what I would describe as aggressive at some points, and it's my personal cell phone line. So I'm just wondering, that we have our ACSD emails, and that's a way that we can communicate and we can return calls, obviously, if folks want us to speak that way. But I'm just want to get a sense of numbers.
I would agree with you. I think that there's been a lot in the press lately about the challenges many school boards around the country are receiving from constituents and showing up at their homes, harassing them on telephone. I think we should remove that. And then if somebody calls into the central office and makes a specific request, it can be filtered that way. But I agree.
Send an email.
Or just an email.
Or just send an email.
Yeah, I agree. And when we talk about our policy committee, I'll talk a little bit about what we're thinking in that.
And I honestly don't know that, like, from an elected official perspective, I don't know, Peter, if you have any perspective on this, but.
Well, so the legislature, you know, sort of our official guide of who we are, we have the option of putting in our own phone numbers, or all calls going to the central sergeant at arms office in the secretary in the Capitol. So, yeah, I think it should be optional for those who feel comfortable with it. You know, some of us are pretty old school and we're still in the phone book and still have a landline, so it's really not that challenging. And I suspect I could probably, on the internet, find everybody's phone number anyway.
Right.
One way or another. So, you know, I think it's almost irrelevant given today's technology, but I think that it should be optional.
I agree with you. I think optional.
Yeah, I mean, when was that decided?
Yeah, I appreciate the optional nature of it. It makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable. Like, I think as a board, we should describe all in or not. And so if we all want to have our phone numbers up there because they're easy to find, great. I'm just sharing what I've experienced in this role, so.
Well, you know, I think in the past, like home phone numbers, because it's like old school Vermont, right?
Right, yeah,
And I think my home phone number is up there, but not my cell phone, because I still have a home line, because we're in the boondocks.
Right.
And so maybe when a phone number was requested, maybe you put a cell rather than a home. And you're right, like having a home phone, like it's intimidating to answer a phone call. I think if that's the accessibility piece, and so I understand why maybe it was put up there initially, or why we requested those, and I also understand, like, is this, in this day and age, is this something that we want to have accessible, or do we want to have, because not everybody emails, right? Like,
Totally get it.
you know, we have to think about who are the constituents and how can they contact a board member if they want to ask a question or voice a concern or something like that. And so I think it's the cell phone versus the home phone or central office or something, and that's how do we resolve that?
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time, since I represent 6 towns, going on town websites to get people's contact information, whether it be on whatever kind of board. Rarely do I see phone numbers, so I think that perhaps that's the best way to go. I think everybody can email and.
But can everybody email?
Or is there going to have an
Call the
ACSD
central
number with
office.
a voice, just a voicemail box?
We could very easily do that.
Yeah.
I'm still old school. I mean,
Yeah, mine's my home number.
My number has been on the school board for all the years that I was there. It was never a burden to me. I know times have changed and maybe people's expectations are changing that way. But I mean, we are public officials, right? And I honestly feel like that's one of the burdens of being a public official. At times it's overburdensome for some people. I understand that.
Yeah.
I don't look at it as threatening, however. If I was dealing with it in South Lake, Florida, or wherever it is, maybe I'd be a little more comfortable.
Actually, have a big issue.
It's happened in Vermont.
Yeah, if we did do the ACSD phone mailbox, then there'd have to be some procedure policy for people going in on a daily basis and emptying or checking to see if there's any messages there.
Do you have like an electronic version, like at work, I can just call in to like a voicemail box?
Somebody would
Something
need to
like
do
that?
that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely solvable.
It's definitely solvable, we
Yeah,
just have
we could
to.
create a
solve
system if you wanted that. I mean, there are a number of different options.
Yeah, I would just ask, I think if the communication committee can investigate what would be a solution before we say we're not gonna do anything or we are gonna do something, that would be great. And then come back with a recommendation. I don't think we can, things are changing as demonstrated every day in the newspaper, unfortunately. And I don't think we can just assume that because we're here in Vermont, that's not the case. And so I just think it's worth investigation at this point.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it'd be better to figure that out now than when there's an urgent need for it. You said you had 2 things, though.
Yeah, I did, didn't I?
Something
And
about
the other
the
thing that.
BLM program?
Oh, yes. So, how should we chat about the recommendation currently for the Black Lives Matter flag raising process?
Oh, cool.
So we're looking at Friday,
This Friday?
yeah, at lunchtime.
Oh,
Oh, we have our meeting.
No, we do have a meeting, that's our communication
Not an
meeting.
event.
That's a short
Great,
walk.
then you can come.
It's a short walk.
Yeah.
Oh, Zoom into the meeting.
I mean, there's a reality to all of this, like
Yeah.
getting everybody
Yeah.
is a slim chance to, so, and we want to get it done
Right.
quickly, because we
Absolutely.
don't want to be pushing this out
Right.
further, so.
And Justin is gonna reach out to the score with that confirmed time so that they're there. You know, in terms of the, you know, like the process, you know, probably Mary saying something is what we were thinking, and then I don't know if score says something, or I don't know how you feel about that, but seems appropriate.
I mean, this is an action of the board.
Yeah,
And I think that has to be that has to be paramount in any message or process that we send.
Yeah.
And so the board sharing with Justin and Peter that we would like to do this is the date. And then let Justin and Peter decide how to incorporate students into this process, and we'll be 100% supportive of that.
Yep.
I don't think it should be us deciding how the students are in the process, because we don't understand the complexity that we will create in making any of those recommendations and actually operating the school that day. So if we can pick a date, say that this is, you know, that the board is going to be raising the flag at that date and inviting the principal of the high school to have, as he sees fit, students available, present, et cetera, we welcome that and would celebrate that contribution. With regards to a letter to the editor, I think the statement is our letter. That's what we've agreed to as a board. We could submit that to the paper as a letter to the editor, as a statement of the board as to why this flag is being flown. But beyond that, we would have to go through a whole other process with regards to that. And again, we've made that statement, let that be the statement, and we can.
Yeah, I agree, and I guess just the question was,
Yeah.
what was the form going to be? The mode.
Lindsay, then Barb?
Yeah, when it comes to raising it, like, I sort of echo what you're saying, it's an action of the board, so hearing that it's happening on Friday when very few people can come, you know, how, you know, like before a board meeting at 5:30 or something, or, you know, like, I don't know who could go if it were to happen this Friday, you know, but,
We talked about 2 times. We talked about right before a board meeting when it's pretty much dark.
yeah, it would have to be like an
And
hour
students
before.
not there, that's
The
the other.
students wouldn't be there.
And then the students
Okay.
are there, so it just seemed like weighing the two, being able to be while students are there is.
So is it, I mean, is it like, it's happening this Friday, so should we've already warned the Communications and Engagement Committee meeting. What time is it supposed to be on Friday?
It's 11:30, I think, 11:30 or 12. I'll confirm with Justin tomorrow morning.
So, I mean, I would, like, I don't want to miss the committee meeting, but I feel like being there for this moment is the most important thing. So how do we reconcile those
Well,
two?
but what time's your meeting?
12 to 1.
As a substitute teacher who knows the schedule, lunch starts at 11:15. A 10-minute break right there in that schedule would be probably the best time if you're going to do something other than immediately in the morning, like we had a bus evacuation drill. So can I just say, as a substitute who's trying to keep my students all in their advisory class if they have second lunch or other things like that, 11:15 is a lot better than noon or anything else. So thank you. Sorry for that.
Yeah, no, I'm talking to Justin tomorrow morning, so that's helpful.
Great, so why don't you confirm the time? Let's try to assume that it will not be noon. and that we can push it as early as possible would be great, so that we can do the committee meeting and meet everybody's needs here. Yeah.
Okay, so is the press release gonna go out in advance of this? Is that on Friday, the raising the flag? I mean, are
If
you
we were
going?
to get, if I was to release it to the editor tomorrow, it would be in Thursday's
Right.
paper.
And so the impact of that may be to have community coming, right? And is that, and that's fine with me, but.
Well, the statement wouldn't necessarily say
Not
that
the-
flag.
Okay.
right?
Yeah, it's the
There's
statement that
no-
way,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay,
I mean, people will know if they're dialed in and are looking at our,
That's today,
watching our
right, yeah,
stuff, then
exactly.
that's
Okay.
fine.
Well, you don't get it if you have it delivered until Friday.
But that's not gonna be the invite. The
No.
invite would be people, there is no invite, right? Like,
Okay.
there's just gonna be
This is
this.
just a board action accompanied by a board statement.
okay.
And we don't need to warn this action because it's not
The
actually
board
a
action
meeting.
We
was
already
to
acted.
direct
Okay,
the
okay.
superintendent to do it.
And yeah,
I'm sorry, was the vision of the flag raising to have it as like a quiet thing with just you and Peter, or was the vision to have the board there? I'm just confused because if we didn't know it was already happening this Friday, maybe that was intentional, like you didn't want us to come.
No, I heard about, we talked about the date, I got an email today,
Okay.
so, and then we
We've
said
been
we
going
can
back
talk
and
about
forth
it.
Which
on
kind of
dates
happened
and
quickly,
times
and like,
Yeah.
okay, because I'm like, oh, if we're like completely changing the vision right now, I'm
No.
feeling like we're like inviting ourselves to a party that.
No.
No,
We're
no, it
inviting
was
us to
gonna be
invite ourselves
Monday,
to.
and then it was gonna be Tuesday, and then it turned to Friday.
Yeah,
It's just been like this kind of like rolling back and forth of, does this work, does that work kind of thing.
Okay, trying to
It also
figure
looks like the weather is good on Friday.
yeah.
Can somebody take it so I can listen to it later?
Any other comments on this? Okay,
Any
great.
other questions for communication update? Okay, just feel free to reach out if you send me an email or something.
Great, next item, policy.
Policy committee. So, now that we've finished our big project, our policy committee is committed to reviewing many of the policies that have been delayed for, the last probably year and a half. We have policies that were enacted in 2016, 17, and 18 that we're supposed to do it every 3 years. So we're going through some of those and we're trying to review them, get them ready to present. Some of them will have no changes at all. Some of them we're trying to find either the documents where it's communicated to the public, and if it's not, how do we communicate those policies in a better way? But in regards to the communication, I know back in the spring, we were talking about, do we need a policy to have some kind of regarding responding to our constituents or public comments? And after looking at a number of the policies that are already in place, we really don't need another policy. What we're gonna do is we're just gonna tweak some of those policies so that it has a statement about making sure that we are responding. But so that's one thing that we're working on. But the public comment, the state's Vermont State School Board has a model policy on if somebody's going to give a public statement such as we have here. We already have sort of a process, but after hearing about all these school boards that are having difficulty, we thought this is a place where we may want to put a policy about how public comment is accepted or how it's, people and the process and some sort of the limits on what time and all that kind of stuff.
Great.
So that it doesn't just get out of hand. But following the model policy, we'll tweak it for us. That's kind of our work.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
You're just talking about process for during board meetings?
Board meetings, but if they want, and it goes back to the telephone calls or the constituents contacting us too. How is it that they can contact us in a way that's fair and open and that we receive that information, but it's not intrusive, that type of thing, and that it's done in a formal way. Okay, and it'll include that as well.
Questions for?
Quick follow-up.
Sure.
Yep.
So the procedure document that our communications team, did you?
We looked at that.
Have any
No.
concerns or, okay.
Oh, that's great. I think you're doing a fabulous job.
Any other questions for policy? Okay, great, thank you for those updates. We have an action to ratify the ACSD ACEA tentative agreement.
Sure, so what is in our board packet are the areas of the master agreement that we negotiated. The master agreement is in fact much longer, much larger. It's a very mature document, meaning that many of the big issues within that have been worked out. And in addition to the fact that all the healthcare stuff is now being done at the state level. So these are the areas where we negotiated. So you can see them in front of you. Number one, this was basically a request that came from the association to recognize the additional work that goes into teaching 3 grade levels with an additional stipend. The vacancy one's pretty minor, it's just how to keeping up with the times and how to post things. The health insurance matter is really in response to the state level negotiations, so that our $1,500 benefit conforms to that $1,500 benefit. If you don't take the health insurance, has always been there. The state level sort of negotiated part of that is that so long as your spouse isn't getting that insurance also through the state ed fund. The duration is the 3-year part, and then the salary new money numbers under number 5 are what we talked about previously, and they're really to accomplish a number of things. Number one, to sort of obviously recognize the work of our teachers and all of that. But there's also an effort there. You'll see things like no teachers are eligible for step movement in year 1, and what that does is it's helping us build the base. In other words, the entry level pay for teachers, because we have a large staff that's been here a while. When we put new money into the salary schedule, a lot of it gets taken up by step increases, which is as you gain seniority or gain something else, you move a step, mainly seniority. And then so if all of your new money is taken up there, there's very little money added to the base. So our base level salaries haven't really been keeping up as well. So what you see there is a reflection to build those up a little higher. So in the first year, teachers don't move up a step, but the raises are distributed throughout the salary schedule. The next year, the step is there. The year after that, the step is there, but we eliminate step 1, which is step 1 is basically your base level salary at different levels of education and different years of experience. And so that sort of bumps it, removes the lowest band, so everybody would start at what would be currently step 2. And then that will require some discussion with the administration over how to re-index the whole thing. It's very complicated. I can't say I really understand it, but that's basically the goal there, is to both recognize the work of our existing staff and to help us build the base for attracting teachers so that this is a place they want to come to teach. I would just sort of add, our sessions were long and a lot of issues were brought up on both sides. There was a lot of passion there. Very polite. I wouldn't call it collaborative because these things are hard to be collaborative, but very collegial. And one thing I just would say about the Association of the Teachers is, as we talked, they could have brought up a lot of things that they're going through right now with our current events in terms of the pandemic, and they didn't. They really focused on, the concerns that either pre-existed the pandemic or will be going into the future as things they want to talk about. They never said, "Oh, woe is us, we're dealing with a pandemic, we should get more." And I was just frankly very impressed that we really kept focused on the core issues that existed pre-pandemic and will exist post-pandemic to solve and address those. And I would move that we ratify the negotiated agreement as put before us.
And I'll second it. Great. All those in favor? Oh, any other discussion or questions?
I was just wondering if the teachers have already ratified, because they should ratify before we do.
I don't know the answer to that.
They met, I think, a week ago on Tuesday and ratified.
Other questions or comments?
I have two quick questions.
Yes.
Am I allowed to vote on this or should I abstain? I should probably abstain, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and are you at all concerned about wage compression with that whole removal of step one? Or do you feel like the others are gonna be bumped high enough that removing it will just?
Well, there's not wage compression in the sense that, you know, it's a negotiated agreement and everybody's on a very specific spot. And we have allocated a certain amount of new money. So it's gonna be all just going forward.
Any other questions? Yes, Lindsay.
In the document and board pack, I'm just curious, somebody signed for the board of school and I just don't recognize.
That's legal counsel.
He's a legal counsel.
Okay, I was,
Represents the board.
yeah, it's like begins with a C.
Yeah.
I was like, yep, no, it doesn't end with an S. Okay,
Acting as our agent.
okay, thank you.
This just jumped out at me. Do we have to go back and do something with the master agreement that expired on June 30th, 2020? On that first paragraph? That just kind of, the 2020 date seemed weird.
Well, let's call that a friendly correction.
Okay, it's 21, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
So we just
sorry. I
assume that that's the
That's a typo.
2021.
I've
That's a
never seen
typo.
that before.
That's a typo,
It jumped out this time.
Great, so
We actually-
any other questions or comments? All right, take a vote. All those in favor to ratify, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great.
Wait, and Suzanne needs to note that Jen Newseder abstained and there's no shenanigans going on here on the
Great.
board.
For the record.
For the
We're
record.
officially on the record.
Perfect.
Also, thank you to the negotiations.
Great job, you guys, in the time.
Yeah.
Getting that done.
We're not done.
Oh, it's closely done.
Thank you.
So next on the agenda, anything for other? I don't have anything. Yes,
SBC's official.
I just wanted to say thank you. I really appreciated having the committee reports on the agenda. That was really helpful. So, thank you.
Do we need an executive session?
Oh, we need a long executive session. We are sort of working out some complex stuff mathematically. So we have another session set with the support staff to get that contract figured out.
Perfect, great.
No executive session needed.
No executive session needed. Can I have a motion to adjourn? So moved by Victoria, second.
That's us.
Mary Heather. All those, we don't do that. Never mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Where do you guys go?